Hospitality Meets is brought to you by RotaCloud, the people management platform for hospitality teams. With its intuitive drag-and-drop rota planner and built-in budgeting tools, RotaCloud users spend an average of 66% less time on staffing-related admin, leaving them with more time to spend with their customers, train staff, or simply take a well-earned break. Head over to rotacloud.com/Phil to explore RotaCloud's full range of tools and features and sign up for your 30-day free trial. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Jose Souto, Senior Chef Lecturer in Culinary Arts at Westminster Kingsway College and Master of all things game. Coming up on today's show, Jose talks about goats.
But if you've got a trailer full of goats and you open the door, they all go different ways.
Phil starts his own cookery show. So to make this soup, you will need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients. Go. And Jose recounts an out-of-depth moment.
You can edit this out, but I shit myself.
All that and so much more as Jose chats us through his epic journey so far. Jose has had one hell of a career so far, taking him to places such as the House of Commons to now taking on the not insignificant task of inspiring the next generation of chefs for the industry. More than that, there's more than enough in here for you, even if you have a remote interest about food and its provenance. And I get the feeling that what Jose doesn't know about food is not worth knowing. One final thing before we get into it, and I know I go on about this, but if you can take 2 secs to subscribe to the show and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, it really makes a huge difference. Enjoy. And a huge Hospitality Meets welcome to Jose Souto. Have I got that right?
Yep, that's it. That's right.
Perfect. That's the first time for everything. But, how are you?
Good. Yeah, good. Warm, hot.
Yeah. It's sometimes that's great, right? And then sometimes you're just like, oh, can we just get the air conditioning now?
Well, I've been at work for the last 2 weeks with basically every day because we've got the exams happening at the moment. So spare a thought for the kids that are doing all their exams at the moment. So 4 or 5 hour exams. Well, actually a 6-hour exam yesterday because it's a diploma.
Right.
And today I had a few meetings here at home, a few basically sort of like Teams meetings as well. And this, so yeah, that's why I'm at home.
I mean, this is the highlight of your day, isn't it? Yeah, no comment. Yeah. Well, just tell the world who you are and what it is that you do.
So my name is Jose Souto. I'm a senior chef lecturer at Westminster Kingsway College. I run basically the butchery side of it. So the butchery, all the fishmongery, fish prep, game prep, all that sort of stuff that comes into the whole of the college. That's for all 3 years and all our part-time and our apprenticeships. As well as that, I'm fairly well known for basically doing game outside the college as well as inside the college. Done a few bits and pieces in my time on the game side. And yeah, that's it. That's me.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're talking about game in animal sense, not just a general sense of PlayStation or board games, if they even still exist, board games.
My 15-year-old would probably be that.
Yeah. Wicked. Okay, well, I mean, before there was what you do now, there was obviously a pathway to you getting to that point. So take us all the way back to the beginning. How did you get into hospitality in the first place?
It was by accident. I mean, to tell you the truth, I know, with other chefs that you've had in here, basically they talk about, how they were from a very young age, they loved to cook and all that sort of stuff. I did, but that wasn't at the forefront of what I wanted to do. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. At school, I wasn't the most academic kid in the class. I was sort of like pretty much middle of the road. And when most kids sort of like in the 6th form and stuff like that, they knew what they wanted to do. I was still a bit sort of fluffy as to what I wanted to do. I didn't understand what I wanted to do. And then by sheer chance, my parents are both Spanish, so both basically came from Spain. And I speak fluent Spanish as well. I speak a little bit of Italian, a little bit of French, a little bit of all the Latin-based languages, if you like.
Yeah, a little bit of Cockney in there as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, English is the worst language I speak out of the 3. But no, my father was a head waiter, and he worked at some quite good places in London. He worked at a lot of the casinos, places like the Crockford, the Barracuda and Aspinall's. He was basically worked up there. And then when he finished at Aspinall's, his last job that he worked of was at the Ritz, and he was the head waiter. So they basically had a head waiter and a manager that were in charge of the Trafalgar Suite. And Trafalgar Suite is basically set up at the Ritz for looking after all of their VVIP guests. So back then it was like when Francois Mitterrand and like Reagan and all those sorts of people, and Gorbachev were coming over for the G7 summits. They would go and have breakfast at the Ritz, in this very plush, beautiful room that overlooks basically Regent's Park. Is it Regent's Park? No, it's not Regent's Park. Hyde Park.
Green Park.
Green Park, beg your pardon. Yeah, Green Park. Overlooks Green Park. We have a beautiful balcony on there. And these guys would basically, that's where they'd be, and that's where they get looked after. All the people, when Cunard owned the Ritz, basically all the top bosses there. And my dad and the manager basically looked after everybody. That was their thing, to look after everyone. So my dad was sort of fairly well known in the industry. And then what happened was he had a childhood friend who grew up together in a small village in northern Spain where they grew up, and they both did their military service and went out into the wide world. And both coming from a very, very small village, they got a bit of the wanderlust. Once they got out of the village, because basically seeing everything else. And one of them, Armando, which is my dad's friend, he ended up basically going to Madrid, and then from Madrid he ended up working as a captain steward on Iberia Airlines. And when we were living in London, he'd come over and visit us, and he'd bring his kids and his wife, and they'd come over and stop off at ours, and they'd be off to New York, or they'd be off to San Francisco or Taiwan or wherever they were going. And they had some great holidays. And I was thinking to myself, Jesus Christ, I could do this, travel the world and do this sort of stuff. And because I had the second language, it was pretty much a done thing. Mm-hmm. So I spoke to him about it when I was leaving school, and I was sort of thinking, I'd really like to give this a go. And he said, yeah, no problem. He said, how old are you? And I told him how old he was. He went, you're a bit young yet. He said, so I'll tell you what. He said, go to catering college for a year. He said, do a catering course. He said, and basically it'll all stand you really, really good stead for working on the airlines. So I thought, okay, well, I'll go and do that. So my dad was a little bit against it, because he didn't want his kids going into the hospitality industry. It's hard work, and he really wanted something better for us. But I started really looking forward to it. And he said, okay, so if you're going to go to anywhere, you're going to go to the best college in the country, which still is now, Westminster.
Right.
So I applied. I got 2 places. I got a place on the BTEC course, and I got a place on the diploma course, the chef's diploma. And out of the 2, I wasn't really looking at the chef avenue. I was pretty much looking at the BTEC, front of house avenue, management. That's the sort of thing I wanted to look at. And so I turned up at college. I remember on the first day. Back then, your uniforms used to get sent to college, and they were wrapped up in this big brown paper bag thing, right, which looked like something that you were being conscripted into the army or something, like that. And I got there, and I got to the first class, and it was a BTEC class, and the lecturer sort of said to me, well, your name's not on the list. And I said, well, I've got my paperwork here. I showed him all the paperwork. And he went, oh, yeah. He said, we're oversubscribed for the BTEC. He said, so you've been put on the National Chef's Diploma. Now, that was horrific to me, because I thought, oh my God, I'm going from basically this avenue where I was going to be quite comfortable working front of house and that sort of thing, to now working as a chef, with a little bit of front of house. And so I was a bit sort of traumatized in my first few days at college, wearing chef whites and basically getting into the kitchen. But I did like cooking at home, and my mum's a brilliant cook, and obviously lots of Spanish food and stuff like that. But my mum was also very, very innovative with basically food and fusion and all that sort of stuff. So she used to cook quite a lot of British dishes, as well as basically Greek dishes and all sorts of stuff that we tried at home. So our palates were quite open to all that sort of stuff. So I for the first week or so I was horrified, and then afterwards I sort of eased into it. And then the first few tests came through, and I was doing really well. I was getting top marks. There was me and basically a few other guys that were basically in the class, and some quite well known guys now. They're out there. Gary Klonger, who is the executive head chef of the
Landmark,
yeah, Gary Klonger, Landmark. Well, Gary was at college.
God, I've still got it.
So he's there. He's basically, he was at college with me, and we were in the same class. And then there was other people, like a guy called Blair Smithhurst, who Blair was basically development chef at M&S for quite a while. He was the head development chef for them, and then he went out to Australia. Now I think he's global head of foods for Nando's. I think he is basically. So so people that so we and I was doing his top of the class, getting great marks, really enjoying what I was doing. And I say this to parents now that come and bring students to us. I'd found my thing. And some of these kids that come to us that are in the same sort of limbo as I was, and their parents don't know what to do, and then they come to us, and within the first year, they see a massive change in them. You know, the kids are into what they're doing. They're loving it. They're getting up early in the morning when they, used to have to lever them out of bed. They're not worried about what time they get home. When they get home, they're cooking, and bringing the work home with them. And these kids have found their thing, and that's what happened to me. I found my thing, and yeah, it went on really well. I had some great lecturers who basically worked with me, Michael Hollingsworth, and I loved it. And after the first year, I was invited to come back to the second year, which is what happens now. They look at all your results, they look at the thing, and you get invited back to do the second year, or they say to you, look, it's not for you, or come back part time, or whatever, or look for another avenue. But for me, yeah, I was invited to come back, so I came back in the second year, and basically what the kids I think now are doing about 3 years, we did in 2 years, and then the third year was like a more of a management side of what our third year is like now, but we did it part time. So I did that. I did 2 years at college, got phenomenal marks. In the first 6 months doing the college, I was doing competitions and basically got through to the national finals. And I loved it. And I really never looked back. I mean, since then the opportunities have basically sort of like opened up for me. When I left college, I went to work abroad in Spain, and I worked in Puerto Banús, which I don't know if people know, but it's basically sort of like the French Riviera of Spain. It's where all the expensive yachts are and all that sort of stuff. And I worked there for a while at a restaurant there. And I did basically 2-3 months there, that restaurant. Then I moved from that restaurant to another restaurant. It was a case of basically I'd left college. My parents had a flat in Spain, so didn't have to pay any rent. So basically went out there and went and worked a couple of different places to learn. So I did another few months at another restaurant, which the first restaurant was more seafood orientated. And then the second restaurant was more meat orientated and barbecues and big grills and stuff like that. And learned a lot about ingredients from different parts of Spain. Learned a lot. Not so much. It wasn't so much classical food. It's a very Spanish orientated food, but very good quality, high level. And then when I came back from Spain, I went to. I basically I didn't have a job in view, and I went and worked for Transport for London's head office. So basically, their head office was above 55 the Broadway, and they had directors' dining rooms there, which were private dining rooms, and there were 6 dining rooms and a restaurant, and it was all for the directors of what is London Regional Transport now. And they had a fantastic kitchen. Budget was no option, no problem. And I worked there for a little while, and then while I was there, some of my friends were working at the House of Commons, and then I got asked if I would apply for the House of Commons. So I applied for the House of Commons and got a job at the House of Commons. Okay, I came in as a first commie, and they had 5 grades of commie. It's a bit opposite to basically the way it works in hotels. So you started as commie 1, and then you worked your way out to commie 5, and sometimes when you get to commie 3, you would skip them, and basically you may become basically a senior chef de partie or a demi chef de partie or whatever. I worked my way up, and I was at the Commons for I think about 11 years. And while we were at the Commons, we had these stages which we used to do, because we had quite a lot of the recesses. Basically, the way the recesses worked is they alternate us to basically work the recesses. So we were offered stages, and I went and worked at the Intercontinental Park Lane for a few months with when Peter Cromberg was still there. Lovely man, really, really nice man. Fantastic, learned a lot from him. I worked at Mosselman's in Belgravia. Loved that as well. Again, lovely person. Even when I see Anton now, even all those years ago, I only spent sort of like, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months with him. He still remembers me, remembers my name. It's the nice thing about Anton, whenever you meet him, he remembers everybody's name. Right. He's such a gentleman.
That's that place is remarkable. When you walk in, even to this day, and the photos of everyone that he's met in the lifetime of either at Mosselman's itself or pre that.
And the attention to detail there, and the calmness of the kitchen, because when I went there, it was a very calm kitchen, and I think Anton he uses that calmness, that knowledge. He's a great teacher, and a great he sees more than one occasion I've seen him sort of come through the kitchen, and he'd see a particular type of ingredients or something, and he'd go over and he'd say, oh, this is such and such. And I remember one day we were doing rabbits for a dish that he had, I think it was a terrine or something, and we were butchering the rabbits, and he saw the rabbits, and he came over and he gathered everyone round, and he started telling them stories about when he was in Switzerland and the rabbits and preparing them off the farm and all this sort of stuff, much to the horror of the the sous chefs, right, who had basically a service starting, right, and they're all standing in the background, like
Right,
going,
yeah.
biting their nails. Come on, let's go. Um, but but yeah, I mean, yeah, great, and the stories he told and everything was great. And then I also worked at the Savoy Grill, and at the Ritz for a little while. So basically, yeah, I sort of moved around a lot basically in that period. That the House of Commons allowed you to do that. House of Commons is one of the best training grounds for any young chef. I mean, even nowadays, I mean, the opportunities they have in there, the time you have to learn and do courses and stuff like that is brilliant. I mean, I did a master fishmongery course and a march and butchery course while I was there, so basically it was really really good. So
Right.
yeah, and then that pretty much brings me up to now to the college, and the college came again by accident. One of the guys that worked with me at the Commons had left, and he went to he was at the college doing a teacher training course because the Commons was thinking about starting up a little educational part of what we did. And the way they started up at first is they got all of the senior chefs. By then, I was a junior sous chef, basically to work to do some sort of training for the demi chefs and chefs de parties and the commies. So you had to pick a subject and then do a training course. And they wanted to head this up with one of the guys that was basically a lecturer, that basically was qualified as lecturer. And Steve Warpole, who's still a good friend of mine, Steve Warpole basically went to go and do that course. And then he loved college, when he was doing his teacher training course. And then he did his course. And at the end of it, a little while later, he decided to leave and go to college. And he rang me sort of while I was away, and he sort of said to me, one of the things that I taught back at the Commons was game, and I'd written a little booklet all on game, for the chefs that we had that we were teaching. And so he asked me to come into the college and do a presentation on game to the kids at the college, and they'd never done it before because game was something sort of like that was on the peripheries of the, of what was being taught. It was sort of like level 3 advanced, and nobody really did it in any detail. And on top of that, it was also buried under lots of old recipes, unforgiving recipes with loads of juniper and stuff like that, very old fashioned. And what I was doing was very different. And also to understand, I've always been a chef that understands about, basically wants to understand about provenance, wants to understand about where food comes from, wants to understand the story of food. So then I can better, tell people about it and better educate people, and also sell it better on my menus, giving provenance to it.
Yeah.
And also to ensure that I'm using a sustainable product, basically of what I'm doing. That was the beginnings of all the sort of sustainability side. So I went and did this presentation. Gary Hunter was there. He was basically the head of school at the time. And he came and spoke to me and sort of said to me, have you ever thought of teaching? And I said, well, not really. I said, I sort of have. All chefs are teachers. We're all natural teachers because we all teach the guys basically on the section how to do something.
Yeah.
And we're all natural teachers. So I thought about it, and then he asked me to come into the college on, in the after if I was finishing early because we did shift work. Sometimes on Friday we'd finish early. So on the Fridays that I finished early, I went to the college and spent a few hours basically in different sections looking at what they were doing. And then one of the lecturers basically was on a long-term sick, and he Gary said, "I've got a position. If you would like to have the position," he said, "you can." I was allowed to take a sabbatical from the Commons, so I did. I took a 3-month sabbatical from the Commons, and I went to work at the college. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah, absolutely loved what I did there. Learnt lots of new things. I mean, I've never really done butchery. I did a course at the Commons, but at the Commons I didn't work in the butchery. I've never done fishmongery. I've never done any of that. I've always been a basically sort of kitchen larder chef. And when I went to the college, I was learning lots of stuff that I sort of knew, but I didn't really know it that well, and honing all my talents on that and how to do things. And so after the 3 months sabbatical, I went back to the Commons, and it's sort of pretty evident, when I walked through the doors of the Commons that I didn't want to be there anymore. Not because I didn't like it or anything like that. It's just that I suppose with every chef there comes a time when you go to the extent of how far you're going to go, and you can't get any further. And a job's what you make it. And at the Commons, it's very difficult to basically sort of to reinvent what you're doing all the time, or to try and to come up with new ideas, because if you're quite you're quite suppressed in what you do. You've got this sort of like this audience that's in there. They're there. They've got to eat in there. And so and that's not derogatory of the Commons or it's the way it works or anything like that. It's just for me, it was stifling what I was doing. So I thought, okay, well, Gary said, well, he rang me and he sort of said to me, oh, the guy that was on long-term sick left. So there was a position opening. Could I come in for an interview? So I said, yeah, well, yeah, I'd like to come in for an interview. And he asked me to come in and interview the following day at 12 o'clock. Well, I was starting service at 12 o'clock. So there's no way I was going to go at 12 o'clock. So he said, okay, what time do you finish work? So I said, oh, I'll finish up at 3:30. And he said, we'll see you at 4 o'clock. So I walked from the Commons down to the college to school, did my interview.
Not that far.
No, it's not that far. It's only around the corner.
Yeah.
Did my interview, did a skills test, did a presentation to a load of kids, and then sat down to a board of people, which basically just fired loads of questions at me. And I think 3-4 days later, I got the phone call that I got it, and that was, I hate to say, 20 years ago.
The rest is history. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there a point in all of that? Because that's I suppose it's not what you set out to do, right? That's not
No,
it wasn't in the original plan. If there
no,
was at this point even a plan,
no.
was there a part of you that thought this could be risky, or there's a part that thought this is, I don't know where this is going to lead to, or anything like that, or was it this is just too cool to not give it a go?
I had sleepless nights over it, yeah. And
Right?
before I actually even said yes to the job, yes, risky. You can edit this out, but I shit myself.
No, I wouldn't edit that out. That's
I didn't. I'm quite a conservative person. I I like change. I like learning new things, and I'm very quick to adapt onto new things and change if I can see a benefit from it. I'm not a person that is stuck in any rut in the way that basically, we do it this way because this is the way we've always done it, always done it, and there's no other way of doing it. No, I'm open to ideas if I can see why, but I want to know why. I want to know the ins and outs of basically why that's going to be better for me and try to understand it and then adapt it and take it and use it. And obviously going from what I was doing to teaching was a big jump.
yeah.
So yeah, I had about a week's worth of basically worrying about it. I had a friend of mine who was a guy who's he was a chef many moons ago. He was retired now, and I rang him up and I sort of said to him, a friend of mine called Derek Stotton, and I said to Derek, I said, oh yeah, this has happened. I've been offered this job, and there was sort of like deadly silence on the phone, and I said, you still there? And he went, yeah, and I said, what's the problem? And I went, well, I don't know. And he went, shut up. And he screamed down the phone at me. Like, he said, you're being an idiot. He said, like, think about the opportunities that this will bring open to you. Think about what you'll be doing and make the job it yourself. But I think one of the reasons why I was a bit worried about it was because back then it was sort of, college was seen as the elephant graveyard, that basically all these great chefs would come to it, right? And they sort of waddled in and, they sort of went there to die, and there
Yeah,
was a pile
it's
of ivory in the
an
corner.
end of career role, as it
Yeah,
were.
yeah.
Yeah,
Pile of ivory or a pile of chef's hats in the corner of the guys that had gone
yeah,
before you. But it's not like that. It wasn't like that. And I was quite young coming into it, and Steve was quite young as well. So we're both quite dynamic, and we wanted to adapt, change, and look at new things and change what was there, to try and best suit and best teach the kids that we have coming. But the whole thing has been about basically what can we teach the kids better? What more can we teach them? How being a chef has changed within the last sort of 30 years. 30 years ago, you're a chef, you cooked. That was it. Now you're an agony aunt, you're an accountant. You've got to understand chemistry. You've got to understand basically health and safety to a much higher level than 30 years ago that you need to understand it. So, and also you are to a certain extent, depending on where you get to, people's conscience. With the food that they eat and health and all that sort of stuff, because people look at you that what you put on your menu is a good quality product that is ethical and sustainable, and you've got to be able to basically say why, and those sorts of things are the things that I wanted to bring to the party, if you like, all that sort of stuff, giving them their feedback, their background, their provenance, their understanding of what it was, giving them those little snippets of information that nobody knew that they could grasp onto and think, oh god, that's a great bit of information to give to kids. Because I think with kids, when you teach them, especially with chefs as well, when you show a chef something, if you can give him that little bit of information that's quirky, they'll remember what you've taught them for the rest of their lives, because that's how they learn. Most chefs are are very sort of like tactile learners, and auditory learners that basically told. I
Mm.
mean, I remember when I was at the college one day, we were doing classifications of soups, and one of the lecturers, Colin Stone, who was teaching me, and that day we were doing classification of soups, and he was teaching us all about the classifications. And he got to this soup called creme solferino, which is a very classical soup, right? And it's a French soup, and the creme solferino is named after the Battle of Solferino. And in the Battle of Solferino, what happened is that the French were completely outnumbered, and the English were chasing them. And they went into this great big gorge, and in the gorge, because they were outnumbered, they're outfired as well. That firepower completely. So what the French did is they set themselves up on one side of the gorge, and as the English came running through the gorge, they bombarded the walls of the gorge, and they created sort of like an avalanche of all these rocks down there that killed a lot of the English army and won them the battle. And then so Napoleon's basically chef came up with this soup to basically for the battle, and it's called creme solferino. And in creme solferino, it's a half potato, half tomato soup, and in there are carrot balls, which are carrot balls signify basically the cannon
Right.
balls, and the white balls of potato, which signify the rocks that came falling down. And though that little snippet of information has stayed with me for the last 40 years, it's a completely useless piece of information. But I remember all my classifications of soup because of it. So
Yeah, but also, I suppose in some way, it kind of maybe it informs the type of teacher you become, because you're actually, you can teach somebody a recipe through the medium of visualization, or through history, or whatever it might look like. And these little things are the things that probably your students remember themselves, and they walk away from, and
yeah,
because you've not just had somebody go, so to make this soup, you will need
yeah,
one,
yeah,
two, three, four, five ingredients, go, kind of thing.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
it's
definitely.
soulless and uninspiring, isn't it?
Well, I'd hope that they'd go away and be telling that story to other people the same way I've told it to you, the same way I've told it 100 times to loads of other people.
Yeah.
And that story, but then the came off the back of that is the remembering of the classifications of soup. All of the ones that basically what they were and how it worked and all that sort of stuff. And that's what I try to do with our kids, as I try to give them those visual looks at what we're doing, and showing them different stuff, explaining things to them, going into a little bit more detail than they would have actually gone through, so that their learning outcomes are a lot higher than what I mean. We have this thing we call the Westminster way, which means that the curriculum basically tells us to teach sort of like that much, and we teach that much, because we want to fulfill them in what they're doing. My section within the college, the butchery section, is an expensive section to run, and the college would possibly save a lot of money by just basically buying everything in Pret, and then giving the kids just these little plastic boxes with the portions of food that they need to cook and the stuff that the restaurant needs. But then they wouldn't be getting all of this extra teaching. We wouldn't
Yeah.
be aging all our own beef. We wouldn't be basically taking foreribs down into steaks or into Cote de Boeufs. We wouldn't be making our own smoked salmons. We wouldn't be making our own bacon and ham and all that sort of stuff. And all those things basically
Gosh,
have
I want a
opened
job.
that world up. Huh?
I want a job. That sounds amazing. Yeah, but that I suppose, and how you can't really put a price on how valuable that is at this stage of their career to learn as well. Because let's face it, if whatever their plan is, whatever they want to become, the more you can give them in that moment, they're probably going to get to the end point of what their identity is in terms of what they find interesting in cooking and all of that, and they've got probably a much greater chance of success, I'd say.
I have no doubt that, and it has happened, that the kids that we're teaching at some point will be on television or in a position where they are moving food trends, and they need to understand the consequences of the ingredients that they're using. They need to understand where their ingredients come from. If there is a problem with the production of that ingredient, if there is a health problem with that ingredients, they need to understand all of that, because they're going to be questioned on it. I have no doubt that somewhere along the lines we'll have the next Jamie Oliver basically at the college again, and we will have taught him. And then he's going to go on to, what I don't want to see him is him basically go on to Saturday Kitchen or James Martin, one morning, and then be cooking a bluefin tuna steak and telling everybody how fantastic it is, and then have a barrage of people basically have a go at him because it's an endangered species and they shouldn't be using it. They should understand the background and the problems of it. And if there is an argument about something, because sometimes also what happens with food is that people can be sort of argumentative to the point where by saying black, I'm not using that because of this, and it's because they're not educated in what it is about the product. So once you become educated about the product, you understand all of the pros and cons and what it's about and that stuff, then you can basically give an opinion. But what you can't do is basically just fall into this rut. It's because he said so, I'm not going to use it. Yeah, you need to tell them why and and explain all of that. And there's plenty of times where people basically have questioned me on my use of product. That. I mean, I'll give you an example. We have a guinea fowl that come into the college. I said when I came into the college, and I started working in the butchery full time, we didn't have a statement for the produce that we use. A statement of ethical buying and sustainability, which was obviously becoming more and more important. And so I wrote a statement of ethical buying and sustainability for the college, and that's available to our customers, and all the kids have got it. It's all on their Moodle pages, so they can read it, and it says why we use different things that we buy, why we use certain things and why we don't use other things. And it explains it all to them. We've gone to the point as well where in our second year in theory lessons, we have a whole lesson that's just all about ethical farming and ethical buying and ethical production of food. Talking about veal, as opposed to English rose veal, the two differences between the two. And explaining it, not saying one's better than the other, just explaining it to them and saying, right, this is how it works. Okay. Now, you as an individual, you need to say to yourself, do I want to be using Dutch veal, or do I know English rose veal is the way to go? Basically, that's the ethical side of it, the farming side of it, everything about it. That's a much better product. So that's the one that we need to be using, and we need to educate people about that one, and move away from that one. Guinea fowl, another one. We when I first came to the college, right, we'd buy a French guinea fowl in, and a lot of them are pinioned. So people that don't know what their pinioning is, on the end of the wing where you've got a bird's wing, you've got one bone that comes up like that, and the other bone goes, and there's a little bone that comes on the end. And that little bone, what they do is when they're chicks, they take a pair of scissors and they cut it off. They cut straight through the bone. And what that does is it means the birds have got one wing longer than the other, so they can't go up into trees. So they can be free range, but they can't fly up into trees at night. So they'll basically go into the houses and all that sort of stuff. So you're mutilating a bird at a very early age for your own benefit, so you can call it free range. So then it's basically you put it on the menu as free range.
Yeah.
That is a real that just doesn't sit well with me. So that sort of thing, we question about that sort of stuff and why we shouldn't use it. And then right down to the sustainability side. I mean, like we started doing all the sustainability stuff at the college way before a lot of other colleges started doing it. Well, we set up a sustainability setup for the college, which the Guild of Fishmongers looked at, and they basically gave us a grade A class stamp on it, saying how good it was. And that's because we were trying to get the kids to understand about sustainability and about using, spreading the load of basically the fish that we were buying, not buying one particular fish all the time, to basically putting too much basically pressure on those fish, understanding about alternative fishes that can be used, sustainable alternative fishes, understanding about the grading system that basically goes with fish and where to find it. Where can they find it? Where can they find that information? So that later on in life, if they are writing menus and they need to be sustainable, they can go and look up and they understand all the pros and cons and where to find that information so that they can put together their own menus that are sustainable and ethical.
Yeah. So, well, here's a question I thought I'd never ask on this podcast, because this is we're going to move into educational now with this question. That's a good setup, isn't it? If I could have got my words out. What fish right now are considered to be sustainable?
It depends on basically what you're looking for. I mean, what we try to do is we basically work closely with our fishmongers. We have a sustainability system which is set up, which is basically we have grades of fish. So each of the fish are graded. Now I use the Marine Conservation Society's basically grading system. So with them, what they do, you look at their setup. They number their fish from 1 to 5. So number 1 being the most sustainable option, and that will be things like, when we talk about farmed fish, well-farmed fish. So basically things like sea bass, bream, some of those sort of things. Arctic chard is another one. All those sorts of ones, and they'll be like a grade 1. They're very sustainable things. A lot of it about sustainable, very well farmed. Well managed farms, basically, if they're farmed. If it's a wild fish, again, lots of it about basically taking. Then we have a grade 2 fish, which is basically on the verge of being, there are management issues with some of the ways in which those fish are captured, which you need to look at. So basically, with the grade 2, it's still a sustainable fish option to use, but you've got to keep an eye on basically how that grading changes throughout the years. We change our grading every 6 months. Every 3 months. I have the new grading come through, and I work it out for everybody. So then we have basically a grade 3 fish, and grade 3 fish is on the verge of being unsustainable. So you should only use it every now and again. Now with a grade 3 fish, basically we put that onto our restaurant menus, because our restaurant menus basically change every week. So it's a very small amount of fish that we're using for a week, and then it goes. And then we have grade 4, which is unsustainable, which we don't use any of those sorts of fish. We have grade 5, which is basically endangered, and we don't use any of those fish either. So the main crux of what we use is grade 1 and 2. And we'll alternate with grade 1 and 2. So basically on grade 1, let's say there's grade 1 and 2, there might be plaice and lemon sole, dabs, there might be basically witch sole. All of those will be a grade 1 or 2. And then we'll look at it, and the fishmongers will basically go, and they'll know which that we want a flatfish. So rather than me order lemon soles, we're ordering a flatfish for flatfish lessons. And they will look at the one with the best price at the moment, right, the best quality, and that fits within the remit of basically our sustainability, 1 or 2. And then they'll buy that fish for me and send it to me. So we're always working in tandem. Sometimes there's a cost implication, sometimes it's a little bit more expensive, but there is a cost implication basically when you're working with, trying to be sustainable and basically buy that sort of product. So then we'll have that. And then for the restaurants, normally we work a week or 2 in advance on our restaurants. So basically the guys will come to me and say to me, right, what's good at the moment, what's available, what's plentiful, what's in season. Because I mean, not a lot of people realise that basically fish are in season. There are seasons for fish at the moment. I mean, flatfish are full of quite a lot of roe at the moment, and they're not particularly good quality. Although I must admit, I had some phenomenal lemon soles through last week, which were really, really good quality. So as we work in tandem with them as to what we buy. When we buy a lot of frozen at sea as well. I mean, a lot of people, to a lot of chefs, frozen at sea is a bit of a sort of like a bad word. Anything that's frozen has got to be rubbish, and it's not like that. Frozen at sea product is basically fished, basically frozen within less than sort of like half an hour of being caught. And because they're QFI frozen on the boats, the quality of the fish is great. When you've got these little shatter packs which you pull open and the fish fall out, and as long as you basically put those in and you defrost them properly, in other words, temper them with boxes of little holes that sit like that, so the water can percolate down through to the bottom and the fish stays out of the water. The quality of those fish is fantastic. We have some phenomenal fish that comes from Norway, which is basically like that. Some really good quality QFI frozen at sea cod and haddock. Really great for products. And so we'll use a lot of that, and we'll basically teach kids that look at the quality, and we'll say to the kids, right, let's get some out, let's prep some, let's cook some, right, and let's cook some fresh fish and let's taste it, and taste it, and you tell us which you think's which. We don't tell them. And a lot of them will get it wrong, and our customers don't, will not know. We're quite proud to put it onto the menu, basically, frozen at sea, on that sort of side.
Sorry to interrupt, but a quick word to give special mention to our sponsor, RotaCloud, without whom this podcast wouldn't even be possible. With thousands of customers worldwide, RotaCloud is already saving businesses like yours hundreds of hours of staffing-related admin every year. It's been described by its users as everything from a lifesaver to an absolute no-brainer, with one customer even saying that they'd rather stick forks in their eyes than go back to doing their rotas the old-fashioned way. If you're ready to take the pain out of people management, I highly recommend heading over to rotacloud.com/Phil to sign up for your free 30-day trial and see how RotaCloud can benefit your business. Now let's get back to it.
So depending on what time of year it is, depending on basically what the seasons are, it's difficult to sort of if I was to turn around and say to you, hake is a great, sustainable fish, and there is quite a lot of hake about, but at certain times of the year that will drop off, and there won't be a lot of hake about, and everybody's sort of mulling around looking for hake, and then you're creating a problem by basically going and buying that hake. To give you an example, getting away from fish with birds, grey partridges. We won't use grey partridges at the college, and grey partridges basically in this country used to be in massive numbers basically before the Second World War. And then what happened is after the Second World War, the government basically encouraged everybody to grow food, and they encouraged the farmers to basically from great big fields to having little fields. Sorry, from little fields going great big fields, the other way around. And they grubbed out all of their hedgerows, and that's where this bird would lay its eggs, would have all its youngsters, it's where it would find insects and stuff like that. And there was big populations of basically grey partridge, phenomenal bird. English partridge, absolutely fantastic. But when they did all of that and they started using chemicals and DDT and all that sort of stuff, it devastated the grey partridge population in the UK to the point that it's never really recovered. I mean, now we're getting really good numbers starting to come back in, but we won't use them because we do not consider it to be a sustainable option or a bird that's sustainable at the moment. If you live in Norfolk and you have a restaurant in Norfolk and you have birds that are being shot around the corner, by all means use that product because it's around the corner from you and it makes sense to use it. But don't bring it here, to London, if you like, and then start showing everybody it and professing how fantastic it is, because all you want to do is loads of other people that want it, and then they create even more of a sustainability problem.
Yeah.
So that's what we try to do, is basically educate, with what they should and shouldn't be using like that. And same with the fish. I mean, the fish, when I first started basically setting all of the implementing all of the sustainability on the fish at the college, we had quite a lot of problems with it because there were lecturers that were used to getting what they wanted and not being questioned. And out in the industry, I could see the same thing sort of happening out in the industry. But we worked around that. People had to understand that I'd have lecturers come to me and sort of turn around and say to me, I want to order some strawberry grouper, for want of a better word, right? Strawberry groupers, right? We're going to order strawberry groupers. And you say, well, you can't. It's a sort of like an Asian fish. Basically, we don't have a lot of them coming in. It's basically sustainability levels. It's got loads of air miles on it. It's not really something we should be buying. So we're not going to do them now. You have to use something else instead. And then they kick up a fuss about it, and they say, oh look, well, I only want one because I want to show my class one. I said, yeah, but you're taking one fish and then you're showing 16 students how fantastic this fish is, and all of them were going to work in different places, which are all going to go, I want that. And you're going to create 16 people that want that because you've only got one, because it must be so rare. And that's what happens with chefs, isn't it? We love things that are rare. On the very few occasions do you find something that's rare and sustainable.
Rare for a reason, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I've ever found actually, which was a bit funny, was white salmon. And not a lot of people ever heard about white salmon. It's also called troll salmon in America. And white salmon is a king salmon. That it's a wild fish that has lost the ability to basically process the color in the food that it eats. So when you fillet it, it's actually completely white. So there is no red color from the crustaceans that it's eating. And it's the first time I ever saw it, I was like completely sort of thrown back by it because I'd never seen it. It's either white or it's like marbled with this sort of like reddish color through it. And when you eat it, it's quite buttery. It's really fatty. It's a very nice fish to eat. And sort of when they come out the sea, the fishermen get paid a particular price for king salmon. But when they're filleted and they found out they're white salmon, I think it's 4 times the price.
Right.
And it's rare, but you never know when you're getting one, because you could catch 100 of them, not have one. So it's only when one turns up that they're very sustainable fish, but one turns up and it's a white one. So that's the only time I've ever come across something that's really rare and sustainable.
Right. Sure. I always learn something in your company. I've only met you really once before. We were lucky enough to have dinner at Cyrus Toddywalla's place on the back of the HRC event, and I could have sat and listened to you all night talk about food generally, just because there's a lot of things that I think that just even the general population probably should know, but don't know, because I think a lot of times it's more convenient just to do what you've always done, right? And go and get that fish that you normally get from your supermarket and all of that, and not know anything about where it's come from. Yeah, so I mean, it highlights to me that there's a greater need, even beyond the education within hospitality itself. There's a greater need beyond that in the food chain.
I think with students, and I think I said this to you on the night when we were at Cyrus's, there's a great saying that I heard.
I did have a couple of beers, so I don't know if I retained it.
And I say it to my students all the time, being a chef, when you get to the level where basically you start putting menus together and all that sort of stuff, I said, you need to have an inquiring mind. You need to want to understand what your food is. I said, don't be the chef that says, oh, just give me it and I'll cook it. I'll make it look absolutely beautiful on the plate. I'll make it taste fantastic and give it to the diners. No, I said, understand your product. Understand the preparation of your product. Understand about how special it is. Respect it. Yeah. And then do all that other stuff as well. That other stuff's a given. You can do that. But all of the background of that thing, make a case for your product. You make the case. Don't have anybody else tell you the case. I said, like, what you want to do is you want to be a goat, not a sheep. And I've said to the kids, and they sort of look at you, they're like, what do you mean by the goat and the sheep? I said, right. I said, if you've got a trader of sheep and you open the door and you let them out into the field, one goes out and they all follow them. Even if if they go off the edge of a cliff, they'll all follow each other because they're sheep. They said, and that's the majority of people in supermarkets. They are led by the supermarket through its advertising, through its basically bread baking at the back of the store, right, to you to go to buy the bread, and through its basically funneling into an area of the supermarket that looks like a garden because it's all green, and yet the rest of the supermarket's all white, to make you feel more sort of like green and with vegetables and sort of that thing. That they're herding you like sheep to buy stuff.
Mm.
But if you've got a trailer full of goats and you open the door, they all go different ways. They're all independent. They do what they want to do, not what the status quo is doing. And that's what you should do as a chef, is basically you should understand as much of it as you can, right? And go and ask questions, go and find out where it comes from, go and find out why they're saying it's so good. Yeah, understand that, and sometimes ask the questions that might hurt, to basically, and they might find a bit offensive, but you're only asking because you want to be prepared and you want to understand, you want to give your customers the best, and you want to be basically using the best.
Yeah.
A lot of this country, abroad, I think in a lot of other countries, people ask a lot more questions about their food, and they have especially in Spain, Italy, France, all those sorts of places, they have a much closer tie to the countryside and food than we have in this country. We don't have that tie. We've become a very sort of like technology advanced, sort of living in cities, basically, sort of really away from our food and food production. There's a lot of foodies in this country, right? And a lot of those really understand food, but there's a lot of people that I heard once in a PR thing that I went to, a PR company, and they said you have two types of people in this country. He said you have the people that basically are interested in their food and love to eat really great food, and then you have the people that are called refuelers, that all they want to do is they eat to basically stay alive. They don't care about what they eat, and they just and in our industry, we shouldn't be that. We should never ever be that sort of. If that's how you think and in your job, then get out of it quickly and go and do something else.
Yeah, don't come and work with food. Well, I mean, it sounds like there is an awful lot more to your role than lecturing.
Oh yeah.
Like, I mean, you almost have to be the font of all knowledge, and I guess you equally that means that you can't stay still. You can't just rest on the information that you've got now, because tomorrow that information could be dead.
Yep. No, definitely. I mean, I set myself right from the beginning. The thing about the college, what it's allowed me to do is allowed me to basically to be that chef that understands about all different things. I've been on quite a lot of trips around the world. I mean, with Alaskan Seafoods, I went out to Alaska. I wrote an educational guide basically for colleges on the sustainability setup of Alaskan salmon, which is a very sort of like it's sort of set up on a 24-hour basis. Whereas in this country, most of our sustainability is set up on the last year's fishing quotas, right, and the diversity of food that's come out of the sea sort of many months ago. We're in Alaska, basically, they sort of fish today. Tomorrow they have a conference and look at basically all their data, and they decide whether they fish the next day or not. And
right.
So when I went out,
so it can be done.
Yeah, when I went out, I mean, that's a whole podcast by itself. That's a fantastic. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, I went there years ago, and even now, I mean, they must even be more technology advanced than I was then. But I mean, it's incredible what they do, and for it to remain as sustainable as it has. And they're managing sustainability, especially for red sockeye salmon, not only for what they take, but also wildlife, reproduction of basically fish. They're managing it on all those sorts of sides to ensure there's enough to go around for everybody and nobody's starving. You can't go in there and basically take sort of like thousands of salmon out of the sea and then basically further up the stream, like you've got bears and wolves and eagles and all that sort of stuff, right? The whole ecology of it that's built off the back of the salmon, all dying because there's not enough salmon. So that was incredible. I mean, I've been to Italy, Parmesan. I've been to Spain to basically look at Iberico pork production, and Rioja region for the wines. I've been to quite a few places to basically look at that and to find out the background on produce, which then we've used as learning tools back at the college. We use that as learning tools to teach our kids about it. And we're very finicky about who we work with because we want to look and use the best produce. So hence, one of my other roles at the college is basically all the sponsorship side of the college. So we're producing the future chefs of tomorrow, the guys that basically are going to be spending money with different companies and basically buying kit and buying ingredients. And so what we try to do is basically sponsors who have products that we believe in and we want to work with. We use those products basically with what we do at the college, basically to be able to show our kids a really good quality product. So hence, basically, I try to find out as much as I can about produce and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, I've got quite a big remit there.
Yeah. God, yeah, absolutely. And then I think what I love about it as well is that you've definitely transformed it from being that job that you go to die in, as you were discussing, into something that I would imagine if somebody's listening to this and they've got a bit of a chef background and you're really, really interested in the provenance of food, they're probably listening to this, because I'm listening to this as you're talking, thinking, God, I want to do that. That's amazing. I'm not even a chef.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's great, and equally, I think that had to change, because you can't create classrooms full of uninspiring
No.
content, can you? I mean, and hope that you are churning out the next generation of students who
No.
give a monkeys about the industry, who give a monkeys about where their food is coming from.
The integrity and the quality of the education that students receives is down to basically the lecturers that are there and the knowledge of the lecturers that are there. About sort of like 6-7 years ago, I started a thing at the college called the trainer program. And because we were getting lots of sponsors that we were working with, I spoke to some of the sponsors and said, look, it's great if we take kids out on visits for them to see products. Brilliant for them to understand that sort of thing. But the only problem happens is that then that whole cohort of kids leave and they take the knowledge with them. I said, what if we start taking a bunch of lecturers out and basically get them to understand? So giving them CPD, if you like, so they basically really understanding of basically the quality of different individual products or places, and so that they can then put that into teaching materials that they can use back at college. And we've done quite a few of these trips. So basically with the Sea Fish Authority, the first year we did it, we went to Newlyn in Cornwall and we looked at, fish quotas, how they worked so that we could understand it better. We looked at the market. We went to visit chefs that basically cook with the products. We went to understand basic sustainability levels of different products. We looked at how they rebranded in Cornwall the Cornish pilchard to become the Cornish sardine, and all of the health benefits and everything, and how that what drove that. So we went to understand all that. The following year, we went to Wales and we looked at aquaculture, and it was basically onshore and a sort of different sort of offshore aquaculture. One was seeded mussels, which are taken and basically seeded in the Menai Strait. So we looked at that, and we looked at purification and all that sort of thing. And then we also looked at a sea bass farm, which was basically in Anglesey, which actually is not there anymore. And it was offshore, so basically looked at all the water purification side of it, what they were doing with the water and the effluents and all that sort of stuff. And in the third year, we actually went to Norway. The Norwegian seafood guys, who we work very closely with, they wanted to take us out and basically look at Norwegian fjord trout, which was a new fish that was coming onto basically the market. It's quite a large trout, and they breed them at very low stock densities. So basically, it's better farming. Quality of food that they feed them is different. We looked at basically how they combat sea lice and the way the whole farming system set up. We looked at cod and sustainability levels of cod, because over there they had some of the most sustainable cod in the world, and looked at the production of bacalao out there. So we went out and did all of that sort of side. We went to a Norwegian college. The following year after that, I think we went to Spain and we did a gastronomical tour of Spain, basically looking at Iberico pork production, cheeses. We looked at Merca Madrid. We looked at wines. We looked at tin produce, which is basically, in this country, we consider tin produce to be basically a second-rate product. In Spain, it's some of the most expensive products that you can possibly buy,
right?
And with good thing, because we were tasting these canned fish and stuff, which was like incredible, absolutely incredible. So yeah, we looked at all of that sort of stuff, and we've done that over quite a few years. We're basically taking the lecturers out, and through that, our educational materials and our ability to speak to the students has become sort of bigger and better. Now we will have equipment at the college basically a lot, sometimes way ahead of what people have got outside. And a lot of the chefs that come into us, that come and do the examinations, they'll come in and they'll go, right, what have you got? What are you doing in their butchery? They'll come and have a look at my smoking units and ask me how I'm using them. And Simon Young at the Rosewood Hotel, I mean, he's had smokers now for quite a few years, and I've done quite a few of the training stuff for basically his staff with the smokers. and it's something that he wanted to get, and he saw at my place, and he went, right, we're going to use these at the hotel, and they've made some great stuff out of it. And we've got all of that sort of thing. Water baths, and we were using water baths way before a lot of other people were using them. Some produce, scray cod. Norwegian scray cod. We were using Norwegian scray cod before any other college in the country was using it. And when Michelle Roux and Simon Holston started working on Norwegian seafoods, we were already using scray cod. Yeah, and we were sort of one of the few bunches that really understood the fish, so that we could explain to our kids, this is what this fish is. And we're lucky enough that Norwegian Seafoods sort of supply scray cod to us every year, so that we can put it on our menus in the scray season, and the kids can taste it, they can see it, they can understand about the background of it and the quality points about scray cod and sustainability, so that they can then, as they go out into the industry, if that product's still available for them, they understand the background of it. So a lot of that is what we try to do. And we try to keep ahead. I mean, a lot of the curing stuff that I do within the larder, aging, we never had a fridge ager. Now we've got a fridge aging. We age all our own beef through Butalar, and we do English roast veal, as well as basically Aberdeen Angus and Herefords. And we age our full foreribs and our sirloins and sometimes rumps, and they go onto our menus. We do a coat the berth for 2 people, basically in the main restaurant in the brasserie. All that sort of stuff, the aging process, our kids can understand it, because the beef comes in, they weigh it, they put a little ticket on it saying what it is and basically how much it weighs. We put it in there for basically 6 days. We take it out after 6 days. We weigh it again. We look at the differences between the two, and I explain to them what's happening. We leave it a little bit longer. They come out at 30 days, and we weigh it again, and we'll see that basically it's lost less weight over the last sort of like 2-3 weeks than it did in the first week, and we explain to them why. We make our bacon and our ham, and we break down a pig. Before, when you used to do pork and you used to do gammon, if you got a piece of gammon and kids were told, this is a piece of gammon, no one explained to them how a gammon was put, where a gammon came from, or what part of the animal it was, or what is a gammon. There's 3 stages to a piece of ham. The first one is basically the raw leg of pork, which is a leg of pork. And when you cure it, it then becomes a gammon. And when you cook it, it then becomes a ham. It's all the same joint, but different names.
I didn't know that.
and one of the nicest lessons I do is I do a development lesson for the 3rd years, and we do a pig where we break down a pig, and I'll take a middle of pork out, and I'll take the belly off the middle of the pork, and then I'll take all the bones out, show them all the bones out, and then I'll cut it in half, and I'll show them the end of it, and they look at it, and I go, see that? And I went, oh, that's streaky bacon. That's where it comes from. And it's like that little cling, little light that basically comes out. And then you cut the loin in half once you've taken it off the bone, and you show them that. And I go, oh my God, that's back bacon. And they understand then where it's come from, because you're physically showing them something. And that's important. And then in those development lessons, we try to go as far back as possible. So we're the only college in the UK that has a deer larder. So we have a deer larder that can hold basically anything up to about 9 carcasses of venison, whole, heads on, feet on, the lot, in there. And we do about anything between sort of 20 and 30 carcasses a year through that supply, through our game dealer, and all sponsored through the game dealer, so sponsored through Highland Game. And what we do is we get, for each one of the 3rd year development classes, I get whole animal comes in. It's a whole deer, normally it's a roe deer, and it'll be head on, feet on, it's just grollocked. And then we'll show them a film about field to table. We'll bring this animal out, we'll explain everything from basically why the animal was chosen, different animals which we choose, which ones you're going to choose to harvest. We'll explain to them about bleeding, about basically fridge temperatures or fridge protocols, is basically what happens in the fridge and for how long you hold it. We'll explain about basically skinning the animal, taking the head off, taking the feet off, explain about different bits of that. And then we'll break down a whole carcass. But what we'll do as we're breaking down that carcass is you'll get them to work out the cost implications of the carcass. How much did the carcass cost? How much did all different parts of that carcass cost? And how much money are we making on the carcass? On a roe deer, which basically a whole roe deer carcass will probably cost you about 70 or 80 quid. We make £1,200 on a roe deer carcass. On something like a fallow deer or a red deer, you can make anything, depending on the size of the animal, up to about £2,000 or £3,000. If you work it properly, understands what you're doing with it. And because chefs are great auditory and tactile learners, they understand it because you're showing them it. You're putting it in front of them and you go, look, this is how, oh, right, I understand where that bit comes from now. Whereas before, it always used to be textbooks and death by PowerPoint and all that sort of stuff. Well, we're getting them involved and showing them something,
Yeah, but also you're giving them tools for. I mean, look at the situation we find ourselves in out in the wide world at the moment, with cost of stuff rising and all of that. You give them the skills to be able to put together something like that, if you're ever at the helm in a restaurant and you're responsible for your food costs and things like that, then these are the things that help you win.
Yeah. Well, like people say, I mean, you always see when there's a recession going on because the chef basically all goes on to cheaper cuts.
Yeah.
And then those cheaper cuts all of a sudden become very expensive cuts.
I remember pork belly once upon a time was very cheap and
Oh,
not.
ox cheeks.
Yeah.
Ox cheeks are another one.
Yeah.
Throwaway bit of food. Yeah, and all of a sudden, right, everybody wants them.
Yeah. Lamb shanks, that's another one.
Yep, another one. Yeah.
Yeah. But great. Well, I mean, look, I could talk to you about all this forever, in fact, but we don't have forever. So I'm going to move it on because I do want to talk to you about a couple of things before I let you get on your way. We have to talk about game because you've developed a reputation for being something of and I've been wanting to use this phrase, a game master. How did that come about? How did you end up? Was that just something that you found a passion and you've just pursued it?
Again, it was a bit of an accident. I've always been a lover of the natural world and understand the natural world, and I found myself when I was at college drawn to books because obviously we didn't have internet back then. Sounds really old, doesn't it? I found really old.
It's not that long I remember the time before internet as well.
It weren't that long ago, kids. But I always found myself drawn to books that had information about unusual meats, unusual ways of cooking stuff. I was always drawn to that, to basically reading about it. And game was this thing that was very unusual, but it seemed to be sort of stuck back in the Middle Ages. The recipes hadn't really moved on, and so I saw it as a bit of a sort of a challenge. I mean, if you take a sirloin and you cook a sirloin, a steak is a steak is a steak. Okay, yeah, you have all these different breeds of cattle. You have Wagyu and all that sort of stuff, which is going to be different flavors and everything, but it's still a steak. But when it comes to game, you have like over 17 different basically bird species in the UK, and they're all different. They're all different, and they all have their challenges. And as a chef, sometimes that's nice, to be challenged with something that's going to be a little bit difficult to cook because you need to understand it better to cook it. Yeah. Whereas basically, if you're told to cook a steak, you know how you're going to cook it and to the degree you're going to cook it. So that's the sort of where it came from. That I'm also a falconer, so basically I'm a deer stalker as well. I fly birds of prey, so basically I have peregrines and goshawks. And
it's the one time we can talk about stalking without getting put in jail.
Yeah, don't go to America and tell them you're a stalker. Yeah, that doesn't bode well. Yeah, I fell into that hole. But yeah, so basically I had this ability to take the product that I'd harvested and taken all the way through to its preparation and its cooking, and how best to show it all off and the understanding of the whole thing, which there were very few chefs at the time. I mean, I think at the time sort of Mike Robinson was doing it. Yeah, he's a buddy of mine, and basically we did quite a lot of work together. People like that. There was very few other people, and later on people came on board that started doing that sort of stuff. But yeah, that was how that started to happen, to have an understanding. And obviously because I'm Spanish, that my Spanish roots, basically my uncles and aunties all basically, the game was quite a big thing. It's a big, real, delicacy out in Spain. Lots of people basically cook it. So that's why, I started doing it, really. And then all of a sudden, I did say to somebody once that basically, all of a sudden I had more knowledge about it than a lot of other people, and I didn't really understand why. I thought everybody knew the stuff that I knew.
Yeah, and then you took that passion, and you've also written some books on the matter.
Yeah. Well, that was basically again a bit of an accident. Everything's been an accident in my life, but
I like that. I kind of that means that you've just been, I suppose, alert to opportunity as opposed to having a grand plan as to how it's all going to end up.
Yeah, no, I can't do that. I can't plan ahead like that too much. The books all started because I met Phil Vickery, the chef, not the rugby player.
Slightly different sized gentleman.
Yeah, Phil loves that sort of stuff as well. And he just written a book called Britain, the cookbook, and he'd done it with a guy who's a very, very dear friend of mine now, phenomenal food photographer, a guy called Steve Lee. And Steve had worked with him on this book, and they'd gone all around the UK basically looking at different foods from different parts of the country and telling the story of it. And Steve's son wanted to be a chef, so he applied for Westminster. Phil asked if he'd give him my number, so he did, and contacted me, and he came into one of my game seminars that we do every year at the college. So we have 2 game seminars at the college, all on game, which includes lunch, one in November and one in January. And so Steve came on to one of them, and afterwards he sort of said to me, "Have you ever thought about writing a book?" I said, well, I said, well, I have, but I'm partially dyslexic, so that's a problem to me. He said, well, there's computers nowadays, you don't have to worry about that, and you can get an editor. So he said to me, let's do some stuff together, see if we can do. So we went out and did a couple of shoots where we were basically doing. He was photographing me doing stuff, and then we had this idea of putting the book together. It was the all-encompassing book on game, and we called it Fur and Feathers. And pretty much after we started, a couple of years in, we said to ourselves, if we want to do this right, we can't have it all in one book because it will be about that thick. It's just incredible. So
Yeah.
what we did is we split them into 3 books, and we produced Venison, which was the first one. It took 8 years to do. Me and Steve went out. We went through about 6 different publishers because all the publishers wanted to stifle us and what we wanted to do. We had a very set idea of what we wanted to do as an educational piece. And also, we wanted it to be for chefs. We wanted it to be for students. We wanted it to be for the man on the ring. We didn't want to take loads of pictures of dead things, right, like other people had done. We wanted to basically show the animals alive and be very respectful about it all the way we wrote it. And also to come up with new ideas, and also have people who believed in the product. It was such a good product that they wanted to be in the book. So we had the champions of venison, some very well-known chefs that are in the book as well, and some of my ex-students that learned about game from me, that are in there. And it took us 8 years. We finally found a publisher. Merlin Unwin Books basically published them, and Venison came out, and it was very well received. It's done really well. It's still doing really well. It's quite a big book. It's beautiful photography. I mean, Steve's photography is just like
I love a book like
nothing
that,
on this
though.
earth. I mean, he's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. And a lot of the time, when you're out in the field with him, all you do is just forget he's there, and he will take the most stunning photographs, and he sees stuff that you won't see. Food photography, he's a master at that anyway. I don't think there's anybody that basically does it as well as he does. I mean, he just loves it. He's got a real passion for it, and we've become very, very good friends over the years. Very, very good friends. And then we finished Venison, and before we finished Venison, we started taking photographs and started going out for Feathers. Feathers took 4 years, and Feathers again, phenomenal book. It's done really well. Again, loads of really well known chefs. I mean, you got the likes of Michelle Roux, Brian Turner, Ben Tish, Anna Haig, loads of really well known great chefs who are friends of mine that I've worked with over the years. And I said to them, would you mind doing it? Yeah, no problem. They've turned up at the studio and they've done their dishes, because of that.
Mm.
And some great students, some students that are, they're really well known now. Some of those students, basically, people like Ben Murphy, Celine Kazim, all those sorts of guys, Will Chalila, all those guys are all in the book as
God,
well.
you are,
So there's some
yeah.
really great, and it's produced really good. And they've done, I think it's just under 40,000 books worldwide. So they've become both bestsellers. And now we're just starting with the last one, which is Fur, which would be rabbit, hares, wild boar, and then we're revisiting venison in the last book.
Right. Exciting times. That's amazing. Fantastic. Well, I do love a sounds like a coffee table type book.
Oh, it is. But I say to everybody, it's not a recipe book. It's a story book telling the story of game right from the beginning to the end. And it's remember what I said at the beginning about this thing where some people have preconceived ideas about a product or an ingredient, and then they cut because that's what they've been told and they can't see beyond it.
Mm.
Well, game can be one of these things that can be really, really, people argue about it a lot. But the way we laid it out in the book is I tried to explain everything to everybody, and I tried to explain it in terms that basically would offend nobody. So that when you read the book from cover to cover, it tells the story of game, its harvest, it's each individual animal, and then at the end of it, it explains basically why we do it. Why do we manage deer herds? Why do we basically need to basically have birds? Basically game birds and that sort of thing. What would happen to the habitats if we didn't have them? How those habitats basically help the environment, and it's explaining it with no bullshit. It's just explanation of what it is. And I say to everybody, it's not a recipe book. Don't read. You read it like a book first, and then use it as a recipe book, because by then you will have learned all about it and the background and the provenance of it and what game's about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I need to. I'm going to end up with about 1,200 coffee tables in my house. I think with all the coffee table books that I have or want. But no, that's great. There's another question I really wanted to ask you. I don't even know if you can answer this, but it just sparked my interest a little bit because you worked at the House of Commons. Any stories from the House of Commons that you can share with us?
Not really. I mean, I will say there's a funny one with all the chefs at House of Commons are quite a comical bunch. And I remember once when I first started, playing tricks on the commies is always like a great thing. And one of the guys that basically he shall remain nameless who it was, but they said to this commie, we had a roasting area. So basically within the members part of the dining room, so it's the members and the strangers. So the members is where all the MPs eat. And in the members, there is an area where there's a sort of cold buffet where they had sliced smoked salmon, salads, and all that sort of stuff. And there'd be two hot dishes on there, fish and a meat, which they could basically come in, take, and run off with it. Then there'd be a carving station, which would be, I think, once a week they'd have a carving station with a particular carved meat on it. And the commies would have to take meat out to the carving station, and also take vegetables and roast potatoes and all that sort of stuff out to the carving station. And one of the guys they sent out there, and they said to him, when you go out, he said, you need to bow to the MPs when you take out the food. And so he went out and he was holding onto this tray, and of course an MP came out and he bowed to the MP, and then he said, don't, and they said to him, don't turn your back on the MPs. So he's bowing like that as he's going through. He's gone up, he's sort of like trying not to turn his back on any MPs, giving the food over. And then they told him that as he walked out, he's to bow to the MPs as well. So he's walking out with nothing and just bowing to the MPs.
Oh,
and he did it about 6 or 7 times until basically everybody was just pissing themselves in the kitchen laughing, and he worked out why.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, that's a rites of passage story, isn't it? Really, I mean, once you can take a joke, you're part of the team for sure.
Oh yeah.
I think everybody could probably recount either when they've been the victim of such humour or whether they've dished it out. But it is
definitely. I mean, and the place itself is quite iconic. I did the. I remember one of my claims to fame is on the night of when Margaret Thatcher got deposed. I did the main course for Margaret Thatcher, for Heseltine, and also for John Major.
Right.
They were all in a restaurant at the same time.
Right. God, what an opportunity that was. No, sorry. Different podcast for that one. Did you cook game?
No. I couldn't even tell you what they ate. I can't remember. I just remember basically doing it. But
right.
No.
Well, they all lived. Anyway, so that was good. Excellent. Well, look, thank you so much for your time and education. As I say, this feels a little bit indulgent for me, this one, because I could just talk to you about food all day long. But one final question before I let you get on your way. What 3 reasons would you give to somebody who was thinking about coming into hospitality as to why they should come and join us?
I think it's a very fulfilling career, more so now than it has ever been. There are loads of facets to the career as well, basically, that there weren't before. I mean, before, you're working as a chef, you're working as a chef. Now, there's basically food styling, food development, nutritional side of it. I mean, there's so many things that basically you can work with within the hospitality industry on food and hospitality. I think you meet some great people along the way. You meet some fantastic mentors that will stay with you, and they'll stay through life, whole, basically friends for the rest of your life. I also think that basically if you have a passion for it, they always say that basically the best jobs are the ones where you go to work but you're not working. Basically you just go to work every day, you love it, you love what you do, and therefore because you're loving what you do, it's not an effort, and for me, my job is like that. When I worked at the Commons, when I worked outside in the industry, every day was a learning day. Every day was basically something new, and even now everything's a learning day. Sometimes my students even basically come to me with stuff, right, that I didn't know, and I'll quiz them about it and try and learn as much as possible, and then do a load of homework on it afterwards. But
yeah,
it's no 2 days will ever be the same, in the hospitality industry. Although those 2 days should be the same. You should be doing lots of different stuff and learning, and push yourselves, within the industry. Get to places, learn as much as you can, move on somewhere else. Don't be afraid to move on. You can have all of the doubts like I had, but then take the jump. Take the risk, and take the risk while you're still young and you haven't got a mortgage.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But no, it's a phenomenal industry, and even my part of the industry, basically teaching, if they can get into that. I mean, sometimes it's great for chefs once they've been out in the industry for a few years, like some of the guys that work with us. They have been out in the industry, left the industry, and now come back to what we do, and they have so much to offer to the kids. They've so much, because the kids will basically look at us as we've been in there a little while, and they start looking at us as dinosaurs that we don't understand the industry. But when you've got somebody that's fresh and come in, who's just been out there, and he's telling them all the same stories as I'm telling them, things ain't changed that much, and basically the way we work outside. Being a lecturer is basically a lot more sometimes mentally demanding than physically. on that. Whereas basically when you're out in the industry, it's more physically than mentally. And sometimes as a lecturer, you need to understand and look at what the kids are doing, and they take what you say as gospel, absolutely as gospel. I mean, I did a quick one just to sort of finish off. I did a lesson once where right at the beginning when I first went to the college, and we were doing a fish, and I was showing them all different batters of fish, and I was taking a piece of fish and 4 or 5 different batters and showing them the batters, and then they all went away to go and do their fish and do their batters to present them to me in the first year. It's a do dem lesson, and then quite flippantly, I turned around and said to them, to garnish your fish, you can use basically a little wedge of lemon, and said you can also do some deep fried parsley. So the first kid comes up to me, brings me the first lot of fish, and he's got this fish, and there's a fish there, lovely. It's on a little doily. It's got the lemon next to it, and there's this great big splodge of batter on top of it. And I looked at it and I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, it's the parsley." Well, I didn't tell them not to batter it, and so they battered the parsley. Yeah, and this is where it is. This is like everything you say is gospel. Yeah, and if you said it, they'll go and do it. Yeah. And then I went, no, you don't do that. You just deep fry the parsley. And then all of a sudden there was 15 other little feet scurried away, right, to go and get rid of their battered parsley. But it's I mean, it's my job is very worthwhile, and it's something that I think basically a lot of people, especially chefs as they get older, if they've got something to give back, look to go into basically teaching. But teaching in the right places. There's some places that just stick to curriculum, and if you stick just to curriculum, do nothing else, it's not as fulfilling as what we do.
Yeah, well, I mean, Westminster Kingsway is at the pinnacle of education, as you quite rightly said at the beginning. It's now down to you to keep it there.
Yeah, that's it.
Fantastic. If people want to reach out to you to learn more about what you do, or just chew the fat about anything, what's the best method for them to do
Instagram, that? Facebook. They can email me at the college if they want. I mean, on Instagram it's Wild Food Boy. On Facebook it's Wild Food Boy. It's Jose Souto. And then I'm also on Twitter. It's Wild Food Boy again.
There's Wild Food Boy then.
Yeah, they can contact me on any of those. Yeah, if they're interested in doing it. If there's any sponsors that basically want to look at work with us at the college, by all means, basically contact us on that. And yeah, great, brilliant. Thank you for having me on, Phil.
You're very, very welcome. Good to chat to you.
Yeah, bye.
Take care. Cheers. And there we have it. Have you ever heard anyone with more passion for food than Jose? What a fabulous career he's had so far, and yet another example of the type of career you can have in hospitality. We will of course be back next Wednesday at 8 PM with another wonderful story from hospitality, but until then, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.